There's nothing wrong with having an empathic nature. That's the way that we're wired as a means for survival. To be able to hone it into a skill so that we can respond appropriately to these highly emotional situations is where leadership is going to take the next step. The capacity that you have to create space for others is going to be limited only by the capacity you have to create space for who. There is wisdom waiting to emerge between yes and no. We just have to create the space for that wisdom to emerge.
How do you stop being so hard on yourself and actually start growing? So that's the question that we're tackling today on The Upward Spiral, the podcast all about creating positive change and building momentum in your life. I'm your host, Michelle O'Brien, and I'm here to guide you on that journey. Now, honestly, I used to be my own worst critic, but I learned to turn it around and create some serious upward momentum in my life. And today I am joined by an incredible guest who's going to help us all do the same. Joseph is an award-winning teacher turned empathy expert, helping people unlock potential for human connection through a deeper connection with themselves. He's the creator of Empathy with Intention, a framework for leaders in all walks of life to tap into their human connection. And his purpose-driven work has been implemented and impacted leaders across America. With his amazing energy, just wait for this, and genuine passion for helping people thrive, please can I welcome to the show, the empathy guy, Joseph Cope. Joseph, welcome. I am so excited to dive into this conversation with you today.
Michelle, it is a pleasure. I'm so excited to be here. You're the capstone of my day today on the other side of the world.
Yeah. And I love that. And we're in different days. So hello from the future. It's Friday here in Singapore.
Well, it is Thursday evening and it was a good Thursday today.
It was a good Thursday. Yeah, nice. I always love it. It's always very strange talking to people. I'm on the other side of the world on a different day. I want to get straight into it today. So you are the empathy guy. Let's just start with a question, like a really simple question. I don't know if it is, but it's a simple question, but what is empathy?
Well, the beginning part of it is sometimes before you define something, you have to define what it's not. And when you have the term empathy, the first word that comes to most people's mind when we think of empathy is one that sounds very similar, sympathy. But sympathy and empathy could not be any different. You see, sympathy is driven by emotions. It feeds on emotions and drives victim's mentality. Empathy is a leader's capacity to create space for another human so that that individual can see the value of change for themselves. Let me say that one more time. Empathy is the leader's skill, the skill a leader possesses to create space for another human so that individual can see the value of change for themselves.
That honestly, I know we had like a pre-call and we've spoken about this before we got onto the podcast, but I think something's just like landed with me straight away. I've gone, oh shit, actually what I thought I was giving empathy, I was actually sympathizing.
Tell me more. Give me an example of what you thought, Michelle.
If someone's going through a really tough time, I feel a lot for that person, often I can feel so much for them that it can affect me. I can feel too much almost, and I get very sad for them or, really swept up in kind of what they're going through. And I always thought it was like I had a deep empathy for them, but it's not. I had a deep sympathy for them because I didn't give them the space,
Look at you getting reflective, and we're not even 2 minutes into the show.
No, shit.
Well, Michelle, let's clarify a couple of things, okay?
Yeah.
Just because you feel bad for someone doesn't mean that you don't have the capacity for empathy. You see, every human is born with the innate capacity for empathy because humans are wired to connect. Part of our survival mechanism is to connect. No caveman survived alone. Am I right? But before there was even words to speak, you had to learn how to feel, see, know all of the nuances outside of words. And that was what was ingrained within you. You see, that was unspoken empathy, and it was part of survival. You had to know what was going on intuitively. As humanity has progressed, we still all have the capacity to show empathy. The challenge is our empathic nature can come out in two different ways. Your empathic nature can manifest as sympathy because your empathic nature led to a means of survival for big T or little t trauma as you grew up. So when you say someone was going through a hard time and you felt bad for them and you felt alongside them so much to the point where you carried their emotion as your emotion, that was your empathic nature manifesting as sympathy because you had yet to hone the skill of empathy, which is why in the definition, the way that I want to redefine empathy and call it empathy with intention. And we'll get into the framework later, but the definition that we're going to talk about is it's the skill that leaders possess to create space. The skill that leaders possess. And that a lot of people a lot of humans have the capacity innately within them because of the survival skills that they developed as a child before they had a choice. Now, though, you have adults, fully grown adults, who get swept up in emotion and they'll say things like, oh, I'm just such an empath. I'm just such an empath. I just feel your pain. But you feel bad for someone and then you feel bad for yourself. And then next thing you know, you start feeling like a victim. And the next time that happens, you start feeling a victim. What happens the next time your friend needs you to support? You're like, I can't do that for you. I'm sorry. That was too much for me. And look who's turned into the victim. There's nothing wrong with having an empathic nature. That's the way that we're wired as a means for survival. But to be able to hone it into a skill so that we can respond appropriately to these highly emotional situations is where leadership is going to take the next step, is where humans can make the jump into the state of being true leaders that can create space with boundaries.
This is incredible. Like, honestly, and I will hold my hands up that I am 100% guilty of that. That's, where I've taken on too much. And then the next time someone's needed me, I've gone, you know what? That was a lot for me last time. And I'm feeling a bit like ashamed actually that I'm only just seeing that now. And I've been in leadership roles, and it making me wonder, what have I missed?
Let's talk growth in leadership, which is awareness is the first key. And because of who we are by nature, when we find out that we've done something wrong, it's actually normal for a human to feel guilty. What you felt there was not shame, you felt guilt.
Yeah.
You felt guilt, right? The shame is if you continue on and continue to tell yourself, I am continuing to be such a shitty person. But you know what you just turned yourself into? A victim. Guess what you're just giving yourself? Sympathy. Yeah. Which is going to lead us, Michelle, into what we're talking about later on. I mean, once we kind of create a foundation of the definition of empathy, we're going to see by the end of this show today how vital it is that not only do we create space for others, because you know this, you're going to try to create space for others, but eventually you hit a wall. And inevitably, the capacity that you have to create space for others is going to be limited only by the capacity you have to create space for who. And there's our mic drop. Okay, we're done with it. Let's go. Have a great podcast, Michelle. See you later. That was easy.
6-minute podcast done. Sorry, we've totally just kind of got off on a tangent, and I think we still probably really need to maybe just kind of go back to, okay, we've established what is empathy. But why is it important? Like why is it vital to humanity?
We touched a little bit on it, which is connection is a required variable for humanity, not to just survive, but to thrive. No matter what your spiritual enlightenment is, if you go away and live on a mountain by yourself, you're spiritually enlightened on Lonely Island. You have nothing to give back to humanity. Humans are wired to connect. But when we connect and there's all of this stuff in the way, unless we can reintroduce empathy as a skill into humanity now. I mean, Michelle, doesn't it just feel like we're living more and more siloed? I'll live in my little area over here. You'll live in your little area over here. You and I, in our pre-conversations, talked about the diversity in Singapore. But even within the diversity in Singapore, sometimes it feels like, well, this is how I am and this is how you are. I'm going to agree to disagree with you on that. And let's just shake hands over fences and we're good. So it stays at this level. But at what point do I start creating a space for you to see not even just the value of change? Let's just talk about the value of perspective shift. How can we move away from my way always being right? Oh my goodness, isn't that just the definition of our world today?
I was just about to say that this is so relevant, particularly in the US at the moment.
Particularly, and we won't go political, Michelle,
No.
because honestly, to me, both sides can create space for the other side. And no one's in the right, no one's in the wrong. It's just a leader who's right feels more like you're right, you're going to vote for. A leader who's right feels more like you're going to vote for. But it doesn't do anything to bridge the gap and create space to see the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
I think I see light bulbs popping above your head, Michelle.
So many. And I'm like, where do I take this conversation? Because there's just, there's so many, different routes, I suppose. I think maybe coming back to what I think we were just talking then kind of about maybe, politics a little bit, and we don't have to kind of touch on politics, but what does it look like when an ecosystem of humans lacks empathy?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I'm going to answer your question with a question.
Yeah.
What would you say, Michelle, is the number one variable for human behaviors to have a long lasting effect? What would you say is the number one variable? Think about this. Behaviors, humans are always trying to change their behavior for the better, right? Like New Year's resolutions are a thing. But what is it that is the variable that determines whether or not that behavior change is going to have a long-term success and a long-term effect? And given the context of our conversation today, that's not bad. But support comes from somebody else. The number one variable for behavior changes to have a long-lasting effect is autonomy. You have to choose change for yourself. And if you don't choose change for yourself, the chances of that being long-term are going to be greatly diminished because the impetus for change was someone else or something else. If your spouse says to you, I want you to try this, you might do it because you love them. But unless that becomes something that you choose for yourself, it will always burn out.
You're 100% right. And
so
go ahead.
Yeah. So let's bring this back to empathy. What does an ecosystem look like when empathy is not there and when empathy is there? You see, in an ecosystem where power is about power over is all about making yourself higher than somebody else, which means your right is more right than somebody else's right. In that ecosystem, when there is such a difference in black and white, left and right, up, down, purple, green, call it whatever you want. When there is such a difference between those and those are exacerbated, there's not a whole lot of desire to change, right? So that would be a system where empathy is not in the ecosystem. Empathy would have to be introduced into the ecosystem. In an ecosystem that has empathy, you're going to have leaders who know what's right for them, but they're also curious about what else could be right. And they're also curious about the variables that they're missing in their right. And as a matter of fact, in an ecosystem of empathy, nothing is about right and wrong. Nothing is about the outcome. Everything in an empathy driven ecosystem is about what am I missing? What am I missing? What is the space that we can create to see? There's a line that I often use, Michelle, which is this. There is wisdom waiting to emerge between yes and no. We just have to create the space for that wisdom to emerge and move away from what we think is right. That's an ecosystem of empathy.
And I love that word, curious. You know, and it's knowing yourself and knowing what's right for you, but then being curious about what are the other possibilities and what other people think are right for them. Like, you don't have to agree, you don't have to be persuaded, you don't have to, but just being curious is it feels doable.
Curiosity is like the door for compassion. Like, when you start wondering, one of the most powerful questions that I've learned to ask myself in times where I vehemently disagree with somebody is, I wonder what their story is. And I just bring the human into the thought. And when I start asking myself, I wonder what the story is. And you know where I learned that skill, Michelle? Working with teenagers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you can't really blame teenagers for a lot of the outbursts and reactions that they do. They kind of are. They're this hormonal soup of delightful I don't know-ness. Like, they're wonderful humans who have yet to develop their frontal lobe. So their capacity to make good choices is limited, but they're just I like to call them my chocolate dipped ice cream cones. They look hard on the outside, but you crack through and they melt in your palm. But the reality in humanity is, when adults are emotionally dysregulated, what do they start acting like? Just like teenagers. And so the strategies are the same. So just because I asked about my teenager who was in the classroom with me, like I asked when Abby comes in and she's cursing up Storm, and after lunch and something's gone down in the lunchroom, if my first reaction is, you need to get yourself together, pull yourself together, go calm down outside in the hall, that's not empathy. As a matter of fact, that's me becoming a victim in the situation and blaming her for her emotional reaction. But in the moment like that, my first question is, I wonder what the story is. Which leads to my next question, which is, girl, you are not yourself. I got a question. Was it an adult thing or was it a kid thing? Because I'm going to go about it totally differently. But even in that space, you're just wondering, what is the story? What is the variable that I can bring in to create space to get this person to see the value of change for themselves?
How do you draw that out of people? Because I'm originally from England. I've lived in Asia for 11 years, and it's obviously we've got a lot of cultural differences here. I work from people, from all over Asia, and it's amazing. I am an open book. Everybody will know everything. I come in and I'll say, I had a really bad night last night. I'm tired. I'm this. I'm that. I had an argument with my husband. Like, I'm very, very, very open about what's going on, and I like to give people context as to maybe why they're not getting my best self today. But often I'll kind of ask colleagues and friends, how are you? What's going on? And you kind of get a sense that you're only getting half a story, or they're withholding, or they're not telling you. Like, how do you really kind of draw that out? And you don't necessarily need to know everything about their personal life. How can we read that a bit better?
I think this is a great transition into the piece of, what does self-empathy look like? Because Michelle, you said you're an open book, which Some people, I'd venture to say, there are going to be some people that you've worked with who have appreciated the fact that Michelle O'Brien, like, you get what you see. Like, she walks in the door and she is what she is. And there are other people, maybe your English Nana, was like, Michelle, like, tone it down just a little bit. And so what we do is we find ourselves sometimes, sometimes we just come to be like who I am in the moment. And authenticity is king. I'm going to tell you, authenticity is always going to be king. How do you draw that out of people? You become a good listener. And oftentimes it means listening before I open my mouth and not assuming that they're going to understand where I am. So if I walk in and I know that I'm not feeling my best, the first thing that I'm going to ask myself is, what do I need in this moment? Now, it might feel good to put all of my feelings out there and let everybody know, look, today's not a day. Don't cross Mama Bear. Don't cross me. I believe me. Like, I had those days in the classroom where, like, I'd walk in and I'd tell the kids, look, Elliot was up all night last night. Mama Cope and I got no sleep. Just don't poke the bear today. All right. And they do it for a little while because they have sympathy. But I don't want to rely on their sympathy for us to get work done. That's not a strategy. So a lot of it has to do with listening, and not just listening to words, but listening for the story that's underneath. So when you become a curious leader, you walk into the room and you start noticing things outside of yourself. I noticed that Michelle, her head is down and she didn't make eye contact with me. I noticed that Joseph, when he walked by me, he said hello, but it felt forced. You just start noticing these things, and then you start embodying this thought. Everybody's going through something that nobody knows about. Everybody's fighting a battle that nobody knows about. I may be the leader, so I have the capacity to say, like, I had a rough day, but do they have the capacity to say the same thing? So as a leader, our emotional regulation is king. And we're going to get into some brain science on this, which is those mirroring neurons are real. So when you put something out, the brain mirrors back the more powerful, the more in control or out of control emotion. And so the more that an emotion is powerful, let's call it powerful, the more the other brain mirrors back to that. So when you put yourself out there, it's a rough day. Some people who are going to have the rough day are going to be like, yeah, it's a rough day with me too. But what about the people who are having great days? Now they feel like if they haven't done the work on themselves, now they feel like they have to tiptoe around you and they have to make sure that you see where we're going with this? So to be able to walk in as a leader and first be an observer and then start getting curious and then wondering what we can do and wondering how we can ask the right questions.
I'm definitely the type of person to kind of walk into a meeting or a room and I'm like, I'm always so passionate about what I'm working on and so excited that I'm like, come on, everybody, let's go. Right, what are you doing? Da, 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 and it's, and it's great for getting things done and progressing. I'm being really productive, but I'm almost definitely missing what my team would need.
That's so reflective of you to be there in that space. One of the hardest pieces of feedback that I ever received when I was in leadership, and this was in education, so I had stepped out of the classroom and I moved into a leadership role. One of the hardest pieces of feedback that I received my first year out of the classroom was, Joseph's energy is too much. And my first thought was, what do you mean? Like, I'm always positive. I always want to see the best in you. I want to draw it all out of you. I've got all these ideas. We're going to make things great. We're going to take over the school. We're going to change the world.
Same.
And what I didn't realize was I was so focused on me being the impetus for change that I never took the space to ask the question, how can I create space for you to add value to the change?
This is this is me. Like, honestly, I'm exactly the same. And I'm having a lot of realizations right now. And I'm definitely going to be having to do some reflections, particularly kind of in my last role at Disney, because I don't think I created that space. Or I didn't do it very often.
Well, Michelle, let's lean in here though.
Mm,
The first realization of any area of growth is that there's pain. Okay. But remember, the variable that is the most important for long lasting change is autonomy. Autonomy comes when you see the need for change or a perspective shift on your own. Right now in your brain, you are thinking, I wish that I had done it differently.
yeah.
And from here, you have a choice. From here, you have a choice to say, I didn't know. That part of me didn't have those skills yet. I had the capacity. I just didn't have the skills to hone it in. My empathic nature became my survival mechanism. And because I learned to feel and then I got over the hump and I wanted to be myself, that's just who I was. But now there's a level of self compassion that you can lean into. I wasn't there, but how can I create space for myself now? I mean, this is where we're really leaning into self empathy.
Mm,
Self empathy is the capacity that humans have to create space for themselves, to see the value of change for themselves. This is what we're doing right here. But there has to be the aha moments where we realize that, boy, I thought I was doing right, but there's the word. I thought I was doing right. It's not about right. It's not about wrong. It's about something in the space in between.
I think that's it. I think I was always trying to be such a motivator. I was like really excited and passionate. We were launching Disney Plus, across Southeast Asia and Hong Kong, Taiwan. It was amazing. And I was like, I just want to keep this project going. I want to make sure that we're hitting the deadlines. I want to make sure the work is the best that it could be. I'm passionate. I'm excited about it. Um, and I don't think I created that space. And you know what? We did a leadership workshop during this time, and it was where you get your colours, where you get your red, yellow, green, blue, and you kind of if you're red, you're very much kind of a leader, a motivator. You're getting things done. If you're yellow, you're excited, passionate, happy. You lead with more kind of like positivity. If you're green, you lead with like more empathy and compassion. You're a little bit kind of more considered. And if you're blue, you're very much more of kind of a data-driven leader. And I was kind of red, borderline yellow. So I was very, like, let's get things done, but in a positive way, but very kind of like direct, always kind of wanting to move things along. But 70% of the other people in the business were green. And that's a kind of very Asian thing as well, that they're a little bit more considered, a little bit more quiet, wanted to have those kind of conversations to warm up into a meeting. Whereas I would kind of walk into a meeting and be like, hey guys, right, let's get, no, let's get things done, because I wanted to kind of move everything on. And when you were looking at the color wheel, they were the opposites. And so there was a clash in that kind of style because, half the room were like, oh God, this is all too much. And they wanted to kind of slowly kind of ease into it and think about things a little bit more. And whereas I was like, let's just get done, let's test and learn, we'll figure it out as we go along. I didn't spend enough time because I don't think until now realized the true definition of empathy in this context at work. And actually, if I'd have had more of it, particularly with people who were sitting in that green space, maybe the working relationships would have been better.
Okay, we're going to add some nuance to your self compassion right now. So I'm going to ask you the question. In that time when you were working with Disney and you earned your red collar, how much self work were you doing on yourself?
Not a lot. I had my kids were 3 and 1. I was working on the launch of Disney Plus with the launch team for 7 countries, and they were kind of rolling back to back. I was training for a marathon. I was like,
Yeah.
and there was a lot going on. The only shift that I had is I'd stopped drinking, but I hadn't started to do the work that comes with that. That came kind of afterwards. So
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't doing any self-work, really.
Mm-hmm.
I was
You
surviving.
had you had made a choice towards health without the alcohol, which that was like the step in. One of the things that I like to talk about when I'm on stage particularly, and when we're in workshops around empathy with intention, is one of the very first realizations we have to have as humans who are on this side, who want to make change, is we can't move forward without looking in the rearview mirror. And so one of the things that we have to understand about the rearview mirror is I like to call them our life's algorithms. The algorithms of life help you to dictate the way that you see life as right and wrong, black and white, up and down. And your algorithms are dictated by how you grew up, where you grew up, the kind of family you grew up in, whether you experienced trauma, big T, little t, if you had, multi-generational households, all of those things, poverty, all of the variables are going to dictate your algorithms. And until you become aware that they're algorithms, you have no idea what's in the feed of life. And so as your feed scrolls through, as you click on like, you reinforce that's what's right. That's what I want. This is who I am. And until you take a step back and go, wait, your algorithms are different than mine. So one of the challenges with some of these the systems that are out there that label you as something, like you were red, right? And your colleagues were green, that label now becomes your identity. And so now there is, you now are justified in some of your decisions because you're red. And then you start saying, well, you're green. You just don't understand. You're too soft. Like get your shit together. I'm red. Would you please get yourself together? And they're looking at you like, would you please just understand that we're all empaths and it's cultural. And no one's right and no one's wrong. But can you see the space between where we missed all of the wisdom? But let's just be real. We're going to go back to the self-compassion piece, Michelle, which is this is pre-awakening for Michelle. Like
Yeah.
this is like I just cracked open the door to awakening and I'm like, I wonder what's out there beyond not drinking, but I'm just not going to drink.
I know. I think that's it. I think, gosh, there's so many there were so many amazing things that happened during that time, so many difficult things as well. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
but again, I meet amazing people like you, and then all of a sudden I've got these kind of like insights, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, now I'm seeing that situation differently. Uh,
Mm.
and then all I can do now is moving forward in the business that I'm in now, and that's
Mhm.
okay. What can I do differently?
Yes. That's all we can do. The only thing that is real is right now. Everything else is a thought or a reaction to something that happened in the past. And
Yeah.
because our brain is wired to look for patterns, the moment that something feels or looks similar, all we have is our past experience. And until we become rooted in the present, what am I going to do right now with what I have right now? And if I screw up, what that is no longer what's real, because real is right now, not 5 seconds ago.
And I do. I was like, we better. Maybe let's bring this back as well. Like, so we keep coming back to the self
Mm-hmm.
empathy.
Mm-hmm.
The inner critic. We've all got one.
Mm.
Like we can be really hard on ourselves sometimes. Like what?
Mm.
Why? Like why? Why do we beat ourselves up?
We beat ourselves up because we don't know what else to do. Did you know? Okay, listen. Did you know this, Michelle? The average child hears an average of 8 no's for every yes.
At least double in my house.
And the children who grow up in houses of trauma or poverty or fill in the blank, right? They experience 2 to 3 times as many. So a healthy home is 8 to 1. That's normal. And when you have dysregulated parents or parents who are struggling or parents who are fill in blank, right? I was working in a workshop one time, and a lady came up to me afterwards. She told me a story. She said, you know that fact that you told us about the no's to the yeses? She said, my brother grew up, and until he was 3 years old, he thought his name was No Nathan. Because that's all he heard. Right? So your question, why do we have an inner critic? It's because the word no got planted into us before we had a choice. Before we could choose autonomy for ourselves, the words no got put into us based on somebody else's algorithm. And somebody else was our parents, and they were doing it with the best of intentions. So they were doing it to help us to survive, but we interpret it as we're not good enough. It's not who we are. I'm not being my authentic self. You started your journey with a 3-year-old. The teenagers are brutal. They're brutal. But what they're trying to do is, this is where, for the first time in their cognitive experience, they're starting to say, I want to be me. I really want to be me. I don't want you to say no. You know what? I'm going to say no back to you. No, mommy. No, mommy. Because they're pushing back. And that's where we start to see this paradox of authenticity and attachment and what it takes to get to the healthy space in that as adults.
Oh God, I say no too much.
We might need to do a part 2, Michelle.
I'm like, yeah. But I do, this is something that I'm like, oh God, like I just hear myself sometimes. And, particularly my poor son, it's like,
how old is your boy?
He's 5 now. My daughter turns 4 next week.
Oh yeah.
So he'll be 6 in May. But it's just God, don't feed the dog that. Don't do this. Don't eat sweets. And sometimes I like to hear myself, and I'm like, I hate it. And sometimes it's a frustration on him. It's like, why are you not listening? But then. And then, I try quite consciously to make room for yes, and it's like, okay, try to set the boundaries, but then it's like, you can have as many yeses within those boundaries as you want, But it's not always easy in everyday life.
Let me share a hack with you that I just recently learned from a coach. She is a somatic breathing expert who I work with. And she helped me to reframe some questions in dialogue with those who we care about, rather than asking, curiosity is the entrance. Okay. But if you ask questions that start with why, they lead to a very binary answer. Why did you do that? And if a kid doesn't know, they're going to say, I don't know, or I want it. But there's no answer because they really don't know. So a way to reframe that curiosity when we're working with people that we care about is to start your questions with what or how. So think about the thing with the dog, right? Your 6-year-old feeds the dog something that they shouldn't. What might happen to the dog if he eats too much human food? You see, what we just did was we just put his brain in the space to think, oh, he might get sick, and I don't want him to get sick. And if he gets sick, then I don't want that to happen. How does it make you feel when we think about that? Yeah. What can we feed the dog that would make the dog healthy? And here we are just using 3 questions, and we got to the why, but we didn't use the word why.
Yeah, but they got to the why as well.
They got to the why. And you just created space for them to see the value of change for who? For themselves.
I'm going to try this.
I can't wait to hear you. You're going to email me next week and be like, Joseph, listen to what happened.
You need to come and help me. I've got another problem. Help me.
Well, listen, you and I are going through an introductory session of empathy coaching. I mean, this is what we do when we work through as a coach. I mean, this is what I do is when people come up to me and say, "Do you work with people one-on-one?" I say, "Are you sure that you want?" Because you don't know where we're going.
Yeah.
We think it's about you and somebody else. Actually, it's about you and you
Yeah.
creating that space for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Coming back to this negative self-talk, like I
Yep.
do feel like the self-criticism can hold me back sometimes
Mm.
from personal growth. Like how can we reframe that? Is this
Mm.
is it a question thing again,
Mm.
what
Hmm.
how can we stop that? The answer is probably going to be self-empathy, isn't it?
It is. It is. But when we talk about self-empathy, let's make sure that we put it in something that feels attainable. And this might be a good opportunity to share the framework that is empathy with intention. Empathy with intention is made up of a framework that I like to call the cargo model. So the cargo model, I love that it turned out to be the cargo model because cargo is very different than baggage. Cargo is delivered with intention, right? Baggage we just throw up above us, we throw it in the backseat. But there is a multi-trillion dollar industry around delivering cargo with intention. So each of the letters in cargo stand for something. When it comes to working in interpersonal empathy, the letters are the same and they stand for the same thing. So the C stands for connection. The A stands for accountability. The R stands for resistance. The G stands for gain. And the O stands for outlook. Connection. What can I do to connect with this person as a human? Just as a human. Accountability. What am I doing to hold myself accountable to my personal values? Am I modeling my personal values in this moment? Am I being the mirror in this moment to model my personal values? The R, what is the resistance in me? What is it that I'm feeling in myself that is causing distance, not space, distance between me and this other person? The G is what is the gain to the other person in this conversation? This is where your traditional value of empathy, like putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, but think about what you had to do to get there. You had to think about connecting, holding yourself accountable, and identifying your resistance. Then we're ready to ask, what is the gain to this person? And then finally, the O stands for outlook. What can we do to shift the outlook just fractionally in this moment? Just fractionally. That is the model that I coach when we're doing corporate empathy workshops. And we give ourselves the space to just have the conversations and we dig into algorithms, right? We dig into who we are. What are some of our resistance pieces? But for the purposes of our podcast today, we get to talk about how to create space for yourself. So let's talk about that framework in terms of self-empathy, connection. What feels disconnected in me right now? And what can I do to reconnect with myself? Which leads me to the values that I hold for myself. That inner critic within you is so disconnected. It's like the monkey brain that invades your space and says, you can't. But I learned a really valuable lesson from one of my good friends who I found on LinkedIn, and she's a coach. And in a conversation where I brought this very thing up, she looked at me and she said, you know what I asked my clients? I asked them, who said that? Because 10 times out of 10, the inner critic in you is not your voice. It's somebody else's voice. It's a voice from one of those past algorithms. It's a voice that comes way from the past. And you're channeling that voice as your inner critic. And so that's holding you. Now you've become accountable to yourself and your own values. And this is where we start to identify resistance. One of the hacks that I like to tell people when I'm coaching them around the space of self-empathy is, in this moment of emotional dysregulation, how old do I feel? How old do I feel? So
I love
even
that.
though it's two adults that are talking, okay? So 22-year-old Michelle goes into her boss's office because the boss called her in. All Michelle got, 22-year-old Michelle got, was, hey, can you meet me in my office? Where does your brain go? I mean, you just went, I'm in trouble. I'm going to the principal's office. So in that moment of creating space, now I'm going to connect with myself. Okay, so now I'm going to stay grounded. And being grounded with myself. To me, sometimes that just looks like focusing on my breath, recognizing colors in the room, noticing my steps as they walk down and I feel my feet hit the ground. And I'm reminding myself, who is Joseph? My values. Joseph's values are compassion, courage, curiosity, healthy in body and mind. Let's embody those in this moment. How old do I feel? Gosh, I sure feel like a 6-year-old going to the principal's office. Or I feel like my dad's calling me to his study because I'm about to get a whooping or something. And just that gives you the chance in that resistance moment to look at your 6-year-old self and go, you know, that was tough when you were 6, but I'm an adult and I got this. I'll take care of it. You go and play, but I got this. But by diffusing the resistance with asking yourself that question, how old do I feel? It's like you become an observer in the moment, which then leads you to the gain, which is the gain in self-empathy is I'm becoming more authentic. I'm coming more into who I am. I'm becoming a functional adult in this moment right now. In another area where I wasn't a functional adult 10 minutes ago, I'm a functional adult. And now look, let's just focus on the outlook. I mean, you've heard 1% change, right? You've heard these small things. We're not looking towards an outcome. I'm not looking to feel good or feel bad. I'm just looking to shift my outlook just fractionally, just fractionally. So connect to yourself, find a way to get yourself grounded, remind yourself what your values are. And so, yes, Michelle, do the value work, go deep, discover what matters to you, because you have to have something to come back to. That's like your code of ethics for yourself, right? And then ask yourself, how old do I feel? Why is there resistance? Lean into the gain of becoming your very best self and remind yourself, my future self is going to thank me. That's the gain. And let's just shift the outcome fractionally, just by a hair right now, so that I can walk into this meeting as a functional adult.
I love that. It's easy to remember. It's simple. I think that cargo is something. It's 5 points on the pan that you can kind of walk through it, and it's something that you can keep repeating as well, right?
It is. It is. And sometimes we don't do it in order, right? Like sometimes something in the moment. I mean, sometimes I'm walking into a difficult conversation with my wife and I have to remind myself, hold yourself accountable. Like hold yourself accountable first. What are your values? Okay. Compassion. Gosh, it's going to be hard to show compassion right now. Maybe it's courage. Okay. Lean in. What's it going to take to step into this right now? Gosh, you feel scared. Like, why are you walking into a conversation with your wife and you feel like you're 11? There's that resistance. Okay, connect. Joseph, just connect with yourself. Stay grounded. Let's get through this. But you see it working through as you practice, right? You practice through it and it eventually just starts to become who you are.
I can really see that though. I can see that the more you practice it, maybe even just kind of writing this down initially, just to, kind of keep working through it and remind yourself, I'm sure eventually you'll kind of be able to go through them.
So let me jump in on this, okay?
Yeah.
The difference between values and skills. The difference between values and skills. Here's a teachable moment. You're getting like the 5-minute version of Joseph's 3-hour workshop, which is values can live on the wall. And they'll stay there and they'll be inspiring for the moment that you put it up on the wall. But after you put it up on the wall, it's lost its inspiration. No family has ever changed their behavior because of a sign on the wall, right? To make those values come to life, those values have to be considered as skills. So think about this, right? My values, my personal values, courage, compassion, curiosity, healthy in body and mind. Now I'm going to reframe it. I need to develop the skill of courage. I need to develop the skill of compassion, the skill of curiosity, the skill of being healthy in body and healthy in mind. It's the same thing with the skill of empathy. You can take this cargo model and say to yourself, I'm going to implement empathy with intention in my life. And you might even put it on the wall behind you and you'll read it in the mirror every day. But until you put it into practice and then fail
Okay.
and then come back and reflect, what was it that wasn't in me, that what part of that skill needs to grow? Then you come back to the cargo model. Okay, gosh, that connection. Oh my goodness, I totally forgot about connection. I was so focused on my values, and my values now I came across as preachy, and I reminded my wife, well, I'm just trying to show compassion. Well, I just took connection out of the way, right? So we do it, we fail, we do it, we fail, we do it, we fail, but we keep reflecting as we fail forward, and we just grow the skill for the sake of creating space within ourselves so that we can create space for others.
Yeah, I love that. I've never thought about values as skills, and something that you have to continually work on as well. You know, just because something's important to you doesn't mean you're necessarily good at it.
How many times have you told your son, brush your teeth, brush your teeth, brush your teeth, brush
Yeah,
your teeth, brush your teeth, right? But what is the skill that he's missing? He actually might be missing in the skill, not of brushing his teeth. He might be missing in the skill of, oh, I don't know, hard
doing as
work,
you're
stick
told.
to itness, doing well. Is that a skill or is that compliance? You know, right? Like maybe he's missing the skill of listening, like really listening, or there's lots of ways that we can frame it. Lots of ways that we can frame it. And this is I'm going to tell you, this is a little insight. This is why I love going in to a corporation and they'll say, look, we've got a code of ethics. And I'll ask, well, how's your code of ethics working? And they're like, well, we do it during onboarding. It's up on the wall,
Yeah,
and then you see it located right by the fire escape, right? Like you see
yeah,
it located on the way out the door, or it's in a banner on the wall. But is it coming to life in the ecosystem of your organization? Is it coming to life in the ecosystem of your family? Is it coming to life in the ecosystem of my heart?
yeah.
It starts to come back together to it.
I know. I'm just going like I just want to have a quick look. So I did some work on my values a while ago.
Oh,
Yeah,
this is real time coaching. Here we go.
real time
Here we go.
coaching. So self improvement is one of
Okay.
my values.
Okay.
Uh, Health and fitness. So like
Mm-hmm.
like you said earlier. Uh, Creativity,
Mm.
adaptability, and
Mm.
authenticity.
So good. Can you say them one more time?
Yeah. So there was my self improvement,
Mm-hmm.
health and wellness, health and fitness, health in body and
Mm-hmm.
mind. However, we kind of
Mm-hmm.
want to articulate that.
Sure.
Creativity,
Uh-huh.
adaptability, and authenticity.
Oh, okay. So let's go through some of those. Let's go from the back to the end. Authenticity. Would you say that authenticity is a skill or is it an outcome?
I think in this day and age, there's an element of skill to it because it doesn't come naturally to any of us. I don't think, it's something that we all have to work at. There's a lot of work that you have to do on liking who you are so that you feel comfortable enough to be your most authentic self, especially when you're creating content and putting yourself out in the world very publicly.
Oh, there's that inner critic coming to us, right? Each of those that you said, so you said authenticity is a skill or an outcome. I wanted to give you the thought of the outcome that I'm driving towards is to live an authentic life.
Yeah.
But the skills that are going to be involved to get there, I'm going to have to authentically show up. Like the skill of presence,
Yeah.
the skill of even the skill of self-compassion, the skill of reflection. See, the outcome, oftentimes when we think of one particular skill, think about how many sub skills are going to go into driving that outcome. But again, remember, in the cargo framework, we're never outcome focused. We're just outlook focused. We're just looking to shift the outlook. So if I wasn't as authentic as I meant to be, how can I grow the skill of authenticity? What do I need in this moment to become more authentic, to get to that place of authenticity? Even if it's just in the moment, what can I do to get there? Look at us, real-time
Oh,
coaching.
I love this. No, this is amazing. I think it's definitely something I want to start maybe going through those as well and start looking at, okay, here's the values that I've written down, things, and the values just are real things that are really important to me at this point in my life.
Yes.
But then it's taking a look at them and going, okay, where's the skill? What's the outcome?
How can I make these come off the wall? How can I make these more than my mantra? How can I make this more than just the affirmation? How can I live these out and not just because when you start asking that question, how can I live these out? Once you frame them as skills, you just realize, well, I didn't have enough skill in that moment. What am I going to do to get better?
Yeah. And it's true. It's that sometimes like your values just feel like nice words, or you feel like you should be those things because they sound good. They could sound great to other people. But it's like creativity is something that I value. It's so important to me. And it's like, but I live that in like our house is just full of like art materials. Like the kids, it's when they get home from school, it's like, let's get the craft box open, let's do painting, let's do, whatever it is. And it's that's a value that over the last few years I've gone, I want to reconnect with that part of myself and I want to bring it back into my life. It's important. And I'm doing it through my children.
I love that creativity is a skill that you want to foster in your children.
Yeah.
I love that. But if we're going to authentically create space for them, who do we have to start with?
Me.
So in the creation of the skill of creativity, you may not have time to sit in your studio for 3 hours to create something. I mean, we just may not have time, okay? But can you be creative in how you approach your children with their creativity? Creativity has nothing to do with the outcome. Creativity has everything to do with the way you approach it. So let's apply the cargo model to creativity. Connect. How am I going to connect with my kids? You remember the how and what questions that we asked? So now, before you even ask your kids, I'm going to ask myself, how are we going to be creative today? How am I going to ask them so they don't feel like mom's harping on them and they feel like they have to be creative, they have to do art, they have to, because that doesn't feel good. So how are we going to create something that gives them the space? Because my value right now is creativity, but it's not creativity in them, it's creativity in me. It's my value, not theirs. Yeah. What's the resistance that I'm feeling? Oh, I just wish that when I was younger, somebody had fostered this in me, or I never had the chance to be as creative as I wanted to be, or boy, when I was with Disney, it sure felt like we were supposed to be creative, but all these boxes stuff fit in. Like you start with, and then the game, then we get led to the game, which is my children are going to see me creatively think.
Yeah.
And when I create the space for them, they may choose to be creative alongside with me. Yeah. And if they're not, I'm going to be creative in how I respond to them.
Yeah.
And look at how it just shifted the outlook.
I love it. Oh, this is so good. And you know what? We're out of time. And I'm like, oh God, I feel like we're definitely going to need to do a part 2, Joseph. This has been wild.
I think in our initial like preview show notes, we had 4 sections of questions, and I don't know if we even got halfway through section 2.
I kind of feel like we did answer them, but we didn't. But I think it's been far more interesting this way, anyway, and so valuable to me personally.
All of your listeners are seeing a one-on-one coaching session that took place in the moment right now, and you all are seeing Michelle at her rawest form. This is beautiful.
You talk about authenticity. You can't get more authentic than this. But you know what? That's good, and I think I really hope that the listeners are kind of learning alongside me, and maybe, yeah, taking on some of the realizations for themselves. And you've got to go and follow Joseph. Like, the work he's doing is amazing. And I'm definitely going to bring him back, and we'll do something a little bit more structured next time. But on that note, actually, if anybody's got any questions for Joseph, or would like him to touch on anything in particular, or if we're going to do a part two, how should we direct it? Do you want it to be more into empathy and leadership, into self-empathy? Where could we go with this, and what would be helpful? And empathy for your kids, empathy for teenagers. Could be a good one.
Do you have a chocolate dipped ice cream cone in your life too?
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Joseph. Honestly, this has been brilliant. And you have given me so much insight to help me with my upward spiral. And there's so many things that I am going to think about differently and start putting into action, especially kind of with the new company that I'm working with. I'm building teams from scratch, and really thinking about how we want to do things differently. And so, yeah, this has given me a lot of food for thought. So really, thank you for coming in today.
Michelle, it has been an absolute pleasure creating space together. Think about the wisdom that emerged today. It's beautiful.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful we've done it publicly as well. Right, next time, I will see you soon, Joseph. Thank you very much to everyone watching. I'll link to all of Joseph's profiles and everything below. So please go follow him and check everything out. And I'll see you soon.